You think you can drag my name through the mud and walk away smiling, Kimmel? You're nothing but a loudmouth with a microphone. Clint Eastwood's voice thundered across the stage, his eyes like steel, cutting through the air thick with tension. The audience gasped, frozen in their seats, as the legendary actor and director leaned forward, his weathered hands gripping the armrests of his chair. Jimmy Kimmel, perched behind his desk, smirked, but it was a nervous twitch, betraying the bravado he tried to project. The cameras rolled, capturing every second of this unexpected firestorm on live television. What was supposed to be a lighthearted interview to promote Eastwood's latest film, a gritty war drama, had spiraled into something raw and unscripted. The root of the clash lay in Kimmel's opening monologue, where he'd made a biting joke about Eastwood's age and relevance, calling him a relic who should stick to squinting in old westerns. The jab wasn't just tasteless, it was personal, a calculated dig at a man who'd spent decades shaping cinema. Eastwood, now in his 90s, wasn't here to be mocked. He'd agreed to the interview expecting respect, not a cheap shot from a host known for crossing lines. The stage was set for a confrontation that would leave the audience stunned. Kimmel leaned back, his grin widening as he tried to defuse the moment with his usual charm. "Come on, Clint, it's just a joke. You're a legend, you know that." But his tone dripped with condescension, as if Eastwood were a child who couldn't take a tease. The crowd murmured, sensing the shift from playful banter to something darker. Eastwood's jaw tightened, his voice low and sharp. "A joke? You call that a joke? You sit there, hiding behind your desk, throwing insults like a coward. I've faced tougher men than you in bar fights and on battlefields." The audience erupted in cheers, feeding off Eastwood's defiance. Kimmel's face flushed, his eyes darting to the producers offstage, who were frantically signaling to cut to commercial. But Eastwood wasn't done. He stood, towering despite his age, his presence commanding the room. "You think you're clever, don't you? Making a living tearing people down. Well, I'm not here for your circus." The crowd roared louder, some standing, others shouting encouragement. Kimmel, caught off guard, tried to interrupt. "Clint, relax. It's just entertainment." But the words fell flat, like a match tossed into a storm. Eastwood pointed a finger, his voice cutting through the noise. "Entertainment? You don't know the meaning of the word. You're a parasite, feeding off other people's work." The accusation hung heavy, the audience now fully on Eastwood's side, their cheers drowning out Kimmel's weak attempt at a comeback. The tension was electric, every word a spark threatening to ignite the stage. The argument's roots went deeper than the monologue. Kimmel had a history of taking shots at Eastwood, from mocking his directorial style to questioning his politics in past shows. Eastwood, a private man, had ignored it for years. But tonight was different. The war drama he was promoting was personal, a tribute to his late friend, a veteran who'd inspired the story. Kimmel's flippant remark about old men telling old stories had struck a nerve, trivializing a project that carried decades of pain and pride. Eastwood wasn't just defending his reputation. He was defending a legacy, a life's work, and the memory of those who'd fought beside him in spirit. The audience could feel it, their cheers growing fiercer as Eastwood's words hit home. Kimmel, sensing he was losing control, doubled down, his voice rising. "You're taking this too seriously, Clint. Maybe you're too old to get the game." The crowd booed, the sound a wave crashing over Kimmel's desk. Eastwood's eyes narrowed, his voice a growl. "The game? I've been in this business longer than you've been alive, kid. You don't get to tell me what's serious." The stage felt smaller now, the space between the two men charged with hostility. The producers, desperate, signaled for a break, but the cameras kept rolling, capturing a moment too raw to cut away from. Eastwood's defiance was a fire, and Kimmel's smugness was the fuel. The audience was hooked, their eyes locked on the stage, knowing they were witnessing something unforgettable. As the segment teetered on chaos, Eastwood took a step toward Kimmel's desk, his boots heavy on the polished floor. You want to talk about relevance? Let's talk about you, sitting there, pretending you're somebody because you've got a talk show. You're nothing without guests like me. The crowd exploded, their applause shaking the room. Kimmel's smirk vanished, replaced by a scowl. He stood trying to match Eastwood's intensity, but his voice cracked. You think you're untouchable, Clint? You're just a guest here and you're making a fool of yourself. The insult was a desperate swing and it missed. Eastwood laughed, a short, bitter sound that silenced the room. A fool? I've made more in one film than you'll ever see in your life. You're the one begging for ratings. The audience roared again, their loyalty firmly with Eastwood. Kimmel's face twisted, his composure crumbling. He leaned forward, his voice venomous. You're a has-been, Clint. Nobody cares about your war movies anymore. The words were a mistake, a line crossed that couldn't be undone. The crowd gasped, then fell silent, waiting for Eastwood's response. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His voice was steady, each word deliberate. You don't get to talk about those stories. You've never known sacrifice, never known loss. You're just a clown in a suit. The audience erupted once more, their cheers a deafening wave. Eastwood turned, his decision made, and began walking off the stage, leaving Kimmel frozen, his desk a flimsy shield against the truth. Eastwood's exit was a slow burn, each step deliberate, his back straight as the audience chanted his name. Kimmel, desperate to regain control, shouted after him, "Run away, old man! That's all you're good for!" But the taunt was hollow, drowned by the crowd's fervor. Eastwood paused at the edge of the stage, turning just enough to lock eyes with Kimmel one last time. "You'll never understand what it means to stand for something," he said, his voice quiet but piercing. The audience was on its feet now, their applause a thunderous rebuke of Kimmel's cruelty. Backstage, the producers scrambled, unsure whether to cut the feed or let the moment play out. Eastwood didn't wait for their decision. He walked through the curtain, his silhouette a symbol of defiance, leaving Kimmel alone under the harsh glare of the cameras. The host tried to laugh it off, cracking a weak joke about grumpy old men, but it landed like a stone. The audience wasn't buying it. Their boos echoed, a judgment on Kimmel's character. Off-stage, Eastwood was met by his team, who'd watched the clash unfold on monitors. They didn't need to speak. The respect in their eyes said enough. Eastwood's war drama, the heart of this storm, was more than a film. It was a testament to resilience, to the soldiers who'd inspired it, and to a man who refused to be diminished. Kimmel's jab had backfired, exposing his own pettiness while elevating Eastwood's legend. The crowd's cheers followed Eastwood down the hallway, a chorus of loyalty that drowned out Kimmel's fading voice. The aftermath was immediate. Clips of the confrontation spread like wildfire, not on social media but through news outlets and word of mouth, the kind of story older audiences shared over coffee or phone calls. Kimmel's team tried to spin it, releasing a statement about misunderstandings and respect for Eastwood, but it was too late. The public had seen the real Jimmy, the man who'd mocked a hero for a cheap laugh. Eastwood, meanwhile, didn't need to say another word. His walk-off was statement enough, a moment of triumph that resonated with anyone who'd ever been disrespected and refused to bow. The next day, his war drama saw a surge in interest, with theaters reporting packed screenings. People weren't just watching a movie. They were honoring a man who'd stood his ground. Kimmel's ratings, on the other hand, took a hit. Viewers, especially the older crowd, tuned out, unwilling to support a host who'd crossed a line. Backstage, as Eastwood left the studio, a young assistant approached, nervous but earnest. "Mr. Eastwood, that was incredible. Thank you for saying what needed to be said." Clint nodded, a faint smile breaking through. "Kid, sometimes you just have to stand up." He walked out into the night, his legacy intact, his fire undimmed. The argument wasn't just a clash of egos. It was a reminder that respect is earned, not demanded, and that some men, like Eastwood, would never let it be taken away. Kimmel sat at his desk as the show resumed after a rushed commercial break, his smile forced, his eyes betraying the sting of defeat. The audience, still buzzing from Eastwood's exit, barely listened as he stumbled through the next segment. His jokes fell flat, each punchline met with scattered claps or silence. The energy in the room had shifted, and Kimmel knew it. He'd gambled on humiliating a legend to boost his own image, but the bet had backfired. Eastwood's words echoed in his mind. "You're just a clown in a suit," cutting deeper than he'd admit. Offstage, the producers were in a frenzy, debating whether to edit the confrontation for the rerun or let it air unfiltered. They chose the latter, knowing the raw footage would draw viewers, even if it painted their host in a harsh light. Kimmel's ego, bruised but stubborn, pushed him to double down. "Well, folks, that's what happens when you invite a cowboy to a talk show," he quipped. But the audience's response was tepid, a few polite chuckles drowned by murmurs of disapproval. The older viewers, who'd grown up on Eastwood's films, felt the insult personally. To them, Clint wasn't just an actor. He was a symbol of grit, honor, and a time when respect meant something. Kimmel's mockery had alienated them, and they weren't quick to forgive. Eastwood, now miles from the studio, sat in the back of a black SUV, the city lights flashing past. His longtime friend and producer, Tom, rode beside him, shaking his head with a grin. "You sure know how to make an exit, Clint." Eastwood chuckled, the tension easing from his shoulders. "He asked for it, Tom, poking a bear with a stick." They shared a laugh, but beneath it was a quiet pride. Eastwood hadn't planned to lose his temper, but Kimmel's jab at his war drama, a film dedicated to his friend, a Vietnam vet who'd passed last year, had been a step too far. The movie wasn't just another project. It was a tribute to sacrifice, to men and women who'd faced real battles, not staged ones. Kimmel's flippant remark had trivialized their stories, and Eastwood's anger wasn't just personal, it was righteous. Back at the studio, the crew whispered about the clash, some secretly rooting for Clint. A stagehand, a grizzled man in his 60s, muttered to a colleague, "Kimmel's got no business talking to Clint like that. Man's a legend." The sentiment spread, a quiet rebellion against the host's arrogance. By the next morning, news outlets were running headlines. "Eastwood owns Kimmel in explosive showdown." The story wasn't just about a talk show spat. It was about a man standing up to a bully, a theme that resonated with anyone who'd ever felt dismissed or disrespected. The ripple effects grew stronger. Eastwood's film, The Last Stand, climbed box office charts, driven by viewers who saw the confrontation and wanted to support him. Theaters in small towns, where Clint's westerns had always been a staple, sold out first. Older audiences, who valued loyalty and honor, turned out in droves, bringing their kids and grandkids to share the experience. The film's story, a veteran's struggle to find peace after war, hit home, its themes amplified by Eastwood's real-life defiance. Kimmel, meanwhile, faced a backlash. Letters poured into the network, mostly from older viewers, calling his behavior shameful. One, from a retired Marine, read, "You don't mock a man like Eastwood. He's earned his stripes. You haven't." The host tried to pivot, inviting a comedian for his next show to lighten the mood, but the damage was done. His audience numbers dipped, and whispers of sponsor concerns began to circulate. Kimmel's team pushed him to issue a public apology, but he resisted, insisting he'd done nothing wrong. "It was just a joke," he told his producer, but the words sounded hollow even to him. The confrontation had exposed a truth. Kimmel's charm relied on guests playing along, and Eastwood had refused to play the game. The older crowd, who valued authenticity over flash, saw through the host's facade, and their rejection stung. Eastwood, unfazed by the media storm, returned to his ranch, where the quiet of the countryside felt like a reward. He spent the morning walking his land, the same place where he'd filmed scenes for his westerns decades ago. The confrontation with Kimmel was already fading, a blip compared to the battles he'd fought in life and art. His phone buzzed with messages from friends, actors, directors, even a few politicians, all praising his stand. One from a fellow filmmaker read, "You reminded us what it means to have backbone." Eastwood didn't reply. He didn't need to. His actions had spoken louder than any text could. That evening, he sat with his daughter, watching the news, replay clips of the showdown. She laughed, shaking her head. "Dad, you didn't just walk off. You burned the place down." Clint grinned, sipping his coffee. "Sometimes you gotta set things right." The triumph wasn't in the argument itself, but in what it represented. A refusal to be diminished, a stand for respect and legacy. For the audience, the story was a rallying cry, a reminder that real strength doesn't fade with age. Eastwood's walk-off wasn't an end but a beginning, a spark that reignited his legend and left Kimmel scrambling in its shadow.